The church was packed. Champagne, laughter, and perfume thick enough to choke on, like this was her coronation, not a wedding. I stood in the second row, right where a place card with my name had been set, like a display tag on a museum exhibit of failure. My ex-wife leaned over, smiled, and said just loud enough for the people around us to hear, "You actually came. I thought you'd have the decency to be embarrassed." That's when the doors opened. A woman walked in calm, expensive eyes that had already decided how this would end. And she walked straight toward me. Let me back up. Because that moment in the church, the place card, the perfume, the woman walking toward me, none of it makes sense unless you know how I got there. My name is Noah Parker. For 7 years I was married to Vanessa Cole. She was sharp, beautiful, and knew exactly how to make a room feel like it belonged to her. I'd loved that about her once. I loved how she could walk into a restaurant and make the hostess nervous. I loved how she remembered every name, every detail, every social advantage a conversation could offer. What I didn't love, what I learned too late, was that she kept score. Everything was a transaction. Every kindness had a price. And when I stopped being useful to her image, she started looking for someone who was. The divorce was clean on paper. No screaming matches in court. No drawn-out battles over assets. Just 2 lawyers, a stack of documents, and the quiet sound of 7 years collapsing into a manila envelope. I walked out of that courthouse with half of what I came in with, and a strange kind of relief I didn't expect. Vanessa walked out with a plan. She always had a plan. I rebuilt slowly. Got a stable job in logistics management. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that would land me on magazine covers. But it paid the bills, kept me disciplined, and gave me a reason to set an alarm every morning. I rented a decent apartment on the east side of town, started cooking my own meals, started running again. The kind of life that doesn't look impressive from the outside, but feels honest when you're living it. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't broken either. I was just a man putting himself back together, one ordinary day at a time. Then about 14 months after the divorce, the invitation arrived. Thick, cream-colored envelope. Gold embossing. The kind of stationery that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. Vanessa Cole and Grant Holloway request the honor of your presence. I almost laughed. Almost. Then I turned the card over and found a handwritten note on the back in Vanessa's unmistakable script. Come, so you can see what happiness actually looks like. That wasn't an invitation. That was a summons to my own humiliation. Grant Holloway. I knew the name before I ever saw it on that envelope. Real estate developer, mid-40s, the kind of man who wore success like cologne. Everywhere he went, you could smell it. His face showed up in local business journals every few months, always next to words like visionary and portfolio. He drove cars that cost more than my annual salary and treated every room he entered like a press conference. Vanessa hadn't just moved on. She had upgraded, or at least that's the story she wanted everyone to believe. I put the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for 3 days. Every morning I'd pour my coffee, sit down, and look at that gold lettering like it was a riddle I couldn't solve. The smart move was obvious. Throw it away. Move on. Don't give her the satisfaction. My buddy Marcus told me exactly that when I made the mistake of mentioning it over beers. He leaned back in his chair and shook his head, like I'd told him I was thinking about swimming with sharks. She wants you there so she can stand on your neck in front of an audience, he said. Don't be the floor mat, Noah. He wasn't wrong, but something in me wouldn't let it go. It wasn't pride. Or maybe it was, but not the loud kind. Not the kind that makes you want to show up with a better car or a better story. It was the quiet kind, the kind that says, I'm not going to let someone rewrite who I am because I was too afraid to stand in the room. Vanessa had spent the last year telling anyone who would listen that I was the reason our marriage failed, that I lacked ambition, that I couldn't keep up with her. If I didn't show up, that story would grow legs. He didn't even have the nerve to face me, she'd say, and people would nod because absence always looks like guilt. So I decided to go, not to fight, not to prove anything, just to close the door on my own terms, standing up looking forward. That decision might have stayed simple if it weren't for Claire Whitmore. I met Claire 8 months before the wedding in a situation neither of us planned. I was grabbing dinner alone at a restaurant downtown, the kind of place that's nice enough to require a reservation, but not so nice that a guy like me feels out of place. She was sitting 2 tables over talking on the phone in a low voice that sounded like it was held together by willpower alone. When she hung up, she just sat there, staring at nothing, and I recognized that look. I'd worn it myself the night I signed my divorce papers. The look of someone watching something important fall apart in real time. I didn't say anything heroic. I didn't walk over with some smooth line. The waiter had mixed up our orders, and when I brought her plate to her table, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes and tried to smile. I said something simple. I don't even remember the exact words. Something like, "Whatever it is, it's not the end." She nodded. We ended up talking for about 40 minutes. She told me she was dealing with a business partner who had betrayed her trust and was trying to force her out of her own company. I told her I understood what it felt like to have someone you trusted turn the ground under your feet into quicksand. We didn't exchange life stories. We didn't become instant friends. But there was a recognition between us 2 people who knew what it meant to sit alone with a mess they didn't create. I helped her that night in a small way. She had locked her keys in her car, the kind of stupid human thing that happens when your mind is somewhere else entirely. I called a locksmith I knew waited with her until it was handled, and that was it. She thanked me, I said goodnight, and we went our separate ways. I didn't know she was worth millions. I didn't know she ran a company that had been featured in Forbes. To me, she was just a woman having a terrible night who needed someone to stand next to her for a little while. We exchanged numbers, but barely texted. A message here, a check-in there. Nothing romantic, nothing strategic. Just the quiet thread of 2 people who had shared an honest moment and hadn't forgotten it. So when Claire called me out of the blue 2 weeks before Vanessa's wedding, I wasn't expecting anything. She asked how I was doing. I told her the truth, mostly fine, except for the fact that my ex-wife had invited me to her wedding, like a hunter inviting a deer to the trophy room. Claire was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. Then she said something I didn't see coming. "If you want to walk in there with your head up, I'll go with you." I told her she didn't have to do that. I told her it wasn't her problem. I told her it would probably be awkward and uncomfortable and not worth her time. She listened to all of it, and then she said, "Noah, you stood with me on the worst night of my year, and you didn't ask for a single thing in return. Let me stand with you on yours." I didn't say yes right away. I sat with it for 2 days, turning the idea over like a coin in my pocket. Part of me felt like bringing Claire would look like a stunt, like I was showing up with a prop to prove something. But the other part of me, the honest part, knew the truth. I didn't want to walk into that church alone. Not because I was weak. Because walking into a room designed to break you is easier when someone believes you deserve to be standing. I called her back on a Wednesday evening. "Okay," I said. "But I'm not using you as a shield." Claire's voice was calm, almost amused. "Good. Because I'm not a shield. I'm just someone who knows what you're worth, even if the people in that room don't." That Saturday, I put on my best suit, a navy blue one I'd bought for a job interview 2 years ago. I looked in the mirror and saw a man who was scared, but still standing. And that was enough. I drove to the church alone. Claire said she'd meet me there. The church was old stone and stained glass, the kind of venue that whispers money before you even step inside. I pulled into the parking lot 20 minutes early because I wanted to get settled before the crowd thickened, but the lot was already half full of black sedans and polished SUVs that gleamed under the afternoon sun like a luxury dealership. I sat in my car for a minute, hands on the steering wheel, watching couples in tailored suits and silk dresses drift toward the entrance like they were walking a